And we are live. JT here. Welcome to the huddle. The huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching with us on Facebook or on YouTube, whether you're listening to audio on the podcast. I just want to thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focus on the here and the now. And my guarantee is you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. We've had some great conversations on social. We've had some great conversations in person. So I felt the time was right to invite him into the huddle and just learn more about his journey to greatness. My guest today is currently serving as the Director of Community Partnerships with the Hamilton Ticats. My guest in the huddle today is Courtney Stephen. How are you today, brother?
Fantastic. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, definitely, brother. And before we get kicked off, pun intended, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, this is a daily practice. You know, some days I do it better than others, but I do find the days where I'm most consistent counting my blessings. I find that those days just gently feel a little bit, more in flow, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace in my life. So I'm a firm believer that the biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So thank you so much for blessing me with some of your time and energy today, brother, again.
No, man, I appreciate that. And it's funny you talk about daily practices. I've got a little book with me here, actually. This is not planned. I just happen to have it. But it's the 5-minute journal.
Yeah.
And so each day gives you an opportunity to have that moment of reflection and acknowledgement and thought. And it goes a long way, something you're grateful for, something that would make the day great, and an affirmation. And then at the end of the day, you wrap it up with the highlight and something that you learned. And it keeps you focused on things that move you forward and things that expand your being and your presence, your capacity. So it's good. Yeah, I like those practices.
I love it. And I'm not surprised that you're a big proponent of, things like the 5-minute journal, because again, I know like me, you're thoughtful, you're intentional, you really have these daily practices to really help you, aspire for your next level of greatness.
Yeah, it's a journey, man. I haven't arrived by any stretch of the imagination, but finding different tools that you can put in your tool belt to help you be a little bit better each day as you're working on this journey. And I always think of when they measure your stats and whatnot, it's almost like a pie chart. And in each different direction is a different competency, and you're trying to become well-rounded. You don't want to have like a spiky pie chart. You don't want it to just be all lopsided one side or the other. You want to be well-rounded and be improving in all areas. So as you focus on one, you might fall behind a little bit in another, and you just have to pull yourself back into balance. So yeah, the journaling and stuff like that, it's a good way to focus on where you're at versus where you want to be while still being grateful for the journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the word journey, right? So I'm curious. One of the things I like to remind myself and others that I'm blessed to be around is this idea of like life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that said, we all have our quirks. We all have these things that make us unique and different. So celebrate it. So I'm curious, is there an interesting fact, that maybe a lot of people don't know about you that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
Oh man, probably too many interesting facts that people don't know about me, because I tend to have, there's personas that you have in the world. There's like who you are at work, there's who you are at home, there's all these different personas on top. But one thing people might not know about me is like I love to play video games if I get the chance. I don't play them as much as I once did, but if I got a chance, I would play. And I actually was recently thinking about just buying I think it's called Nintendo Switch, and like buying the old or the newest Pokemon game. Why? I'm not even like really into that, but it's just an escape from taking life so serious and
Mhm.
running from one meeting to the next, commuting, getting in the car, picking up the kids, what's for dinner. It's just a way to break off from all the serious stuff and do something that absolutely does not matter at all.
I love that. And it was interesting because I was going to ask you, like, what is it about, video games that speaks to you, you feel called to? And like you said, it just reminds you that, again, like it's a game. Let's have some fun with it. Let's just play this game of life and make the best of it.
Yeah, people can over optimize, like especially myself. This is when I talk about getting back in balance.
Mhm.
Hyper goal driven, right? So I played professional sports for 7 years in the Canadian Football League. And obviously before that, I was playing collegiately. I played amateur sports, always hyper goal focused. Even now, I'm very goal oriented person. So um always had this sense that time was winding down. It was like the sands of an hourglass or falling, and you could do nothing to stop them. So I felt like I would have to take advantage of every waking moment,
Mhm.
almost like a compulsion to action, to do something, because my competition's out there doing something, or I could be doing a little bit more. I could be better. I could be further ahead. And I think when you over optimize for performance,
Mhm.
you forget that the result is not actually what you're getting the benefit for. You're growing most during the journey towards that goal. And
Mhm.
if you only celebrated when you reach the mountaintop, then 99% of the time you'd be suffering instead of celebrating, because very few of us ever get to lift up the championship trophy. It's one of those things where even if you do win, then you go on to the next thing and you feel empty. And it's like, you've missed the point. The point isn't actually to win the championship. Don't get me wrong. I love some rings. I love some trophies, but learning to fall in love with the process of things
Mhm.
instead of over optimizing for getting to the next goal, and just sometimes sitting back and looking at the distance you've covered already, appreciating that, and then taking some time off to enjoy the life that you've created while you're building the life that you want.
Yeah. I love that you share that, and why it resonates with me so well is this idea of, like, as a high quality athlete and a coach, they have this beautiful balance between being goal oriented and process driven. So I'm curious, was this something that you understood as an athlete, or was there kind of a moment or an experience for you where you really started to understand, like, the beauty really is in the journey, it's not in that final destination?
Um, many times we have to learn something more than once. So in college, I played at Wilfrid Laurier University for 2 years, and then I packaged up my film, marketed myself as like a transfer student. I went to Northern Illinois University as a walk-on, eventually earned a scholarship and spent the last 3 years of my collegiate career there. And I just remember one of my conversations I had with my older brother, who also played collegiate football before me. He said, like, this journey goes so fast, you have to take time and stop and look around and smell the roses, because you're going to be done very fast. Like, you're going to be out of here much longer than you're in here. And so while you're in here, just remember to like look around, take a photo, like get that mental image of this burned into your brain, because these will be some of your best memories.
Mhm.
Even though right now you're waking up at 5 and going to a winter workouts and your legs are sore because you just hit personal bests on squats and cleans, and your chest is blowing up because the strength coach got you doing 10 sets of bench and whatever it is that's crazy about college sports. It was always, kind of take a second to stop and appreciate where you're at, because it will go quickly. So it was that initial lesson, but then I had to revisit that, and I continue to have to revisit that on a smaller scale, like daily. And then on the bigger scale, just in terms of life and other things now that continue to change. Like my kids now, I'm watching them grow up, and they grow so fast because they're at such a young age that now I have to stop and remember to like see their moments, because the difference between a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old is huge. It's a lot bigger than the difference between a 30-year-old and a 32-year-old, right? So it's a recurring theme to have to stop and smell the roses.
Again, it's amazing, like as you share that, and I love how you made reference to that, stop and smell the roses. As you were describing it, that saying was coming on the screen in my mind. And why it resonates with me so much is, depending on when people are listening to this or watching this, like I mentioned to you before we went live here, I just got back from a family vacation, and it was amazing that I used to believe, and I used to be the type of person that would always be looking forward to that next vacation. And it's only been in the last couple of years where I've really started to understand that the vacation is a byproduct of all the focus reps and sets I've been doing to get to that point, to be able to bless my family with that. And it's really just an ongoing reminder on vacation to just be right here, be right now. And it's like this delicate dance where some moments I forget it and I get really focused on what's next. But then sometimes I'm just like, no, just be here, be right now. Talk to your wife, play with your kids. Your daughter's asking her to throw her in the pool, So it definitely resonates with me, brother.
Totally. And I mean, it's an active thing. Being present is an active thing. You almost think about other things, and then you have to consciously bring yourself back into focus. And that's a skill. It's a muscle that takes development, right? Like the most tangible example of that is reading. A lot of people that I've come across in my time, if they've either told me they don't enjoy reading, or they're not good at it, or they can't read a book, or whatever it may be. And all that is that their focus muscle isn't there, right? And the reason why I actually got into reading habitually is because it forced me to do something where I wanted to get distracted naturally, and I had to draw myself back into the focus, because if you could develop focus in one realm, you can take that skill and transplant it into a different segment of your life and use that as an advantage to get ahead. So you can do more in less time, and then still have that space to like enjoy and be in the moment, because you're more efficient with the time that you actually are putting in.
I love that. Great reminder on the power of mental muscles, right? And your will, your ability to focus, such an important muscle to have. So I'm curious. One of the things that inspired me, and I was remembering in preparation for this conversation today, of how did we actually first get connected? And we actually first got connected on LinkedIn. And I remember what inspired me to connect with you was just, I remember just seeing multiple posts that you were sharing, things you were sharing, where it's just like, okay, he sees the big picture. Like, yes, he's a professional athlete, but that's just part of who he is. Like, he sees the game of life. So I'm curious, what has that transition been like for you, transitioning from being, actively, as a professional athlete, transitioning into this new adventure in your life?
Man, it's funny you asked that, because I've got a blog post in the drafts that's been there for about months. I don't even know. Because this is something I've thought about a lot. And I thought about it a lot beforehand, and I thought about it a lot before I even became a professional athlete. So typically we think of transitions as moments in time, but a transition out of my football career began the day I stepped on the field as a rookie. And I always, in the back of my mind, maybe this is a deeper conversation in and of itself. A lot of people think about, how good they can be and how good the people around them are. And I always thought about how good everyone else was that I couldn't see. Because my biggest fear wasn't that I was, going to go to a camp and everyone else was going to be better than me. I thought that I could be the best. I was afraid of the guy I didn't see who was somewhere else in some small town with like just a massive chip on his shoulder that was coming to do the unthinkable and take my spot. So when I got onto the football field, that same kind of fear driven motivation had me thinking, yeah, they can tell you you might play 7, 8, 9, 10 years, but what if you only play one? How are you going to make sure that this one is the most meaningful, most impactful one that it could possibly be? How are you going to take this opportunity and parlay that into your next? What are some things that you can walk away with? If it's all over today, what are some things that you can walk away with so that you have something to show for and this isn't in vain? So somewhat motivated by fear, healthy or unhealthy, I think that made me think about like, what am I going to do next? So I had a couple of main goals while I was playing. I was first of all going to make sure that I made some money, because when you're in a state of desperation, you have to do what you have to do, and you don't have the liberty to do what you want to do. So that means depending on how many people I was accountable to, or how many people relied on me at the time of my departure from the game, that would be directly correlated to the amount of time I was able to spend finding the right opportunity. So I knew if I had more of a buffer, if I built a runway financially, that I'd give myself the capacity to even think about getting into the right opportunity. And if I didn't have that buffer, I would have to take the first job that was available to me because I needed the checks to start coming in again. So the first thing I did was save up some money. Actually, that's a lie. That's the second thing I did. The first thing I did was pay off my school debt from when I went to Wilfrid Laurier. So I graduated with about $20,000 in debt. And I know that for some, that's a lot. For some, that's not a lot. Coming out of college as somebody who my previous work was in retail part-time, that was a lot of money for me. So being able to get debt-free was a huge component of what sports was going to do for me in my life. I think of sports as a vehicle, and a lot of this theme of journey, not the destination. Sports just helps get down the road, professional sports, that is, and even collegiate sports. It helps you get down the road a little bit further, a little bit faster, but you still have a lot of work to do. So I was going to use football as an opportunity for me to get to that milestone of breaking debt free. Debt free is a milestone. It's not a goal, right? So I got debt free. Then I built up a cash runway. I developed my network. Your network is going to determine what opportunities are available to you, right? You can't have an opportunity if you're not in the place where opportunities come from. They come from meeting people, talking to people, getting to know them, seeing what they need and where that intersects with what you have to offer. Aside from building up my network, I built up my net worth. So I got assets. So I got a down payment and bought a house. I bought a condo. So I got my foot in that game. So if I was my hourly or my salary was taken away from me, I had something I could sell. And then finally, the fifth thing was I built a business. And so a business is something that I had equity in, that I had direct control over the future of. And so that was a youth mentorship academy that taught people basically the exact system that I used to go from being just a kid playing amateur football in Brampton to being at Wilfrid Laurier to walking on, playing at a top 25 school, and then being drafted into the CFL. And I packaged all of that up with my partner who played in the CFL with me. And, we talked about these things as we were in our careers. What are we going to do to set ourselves up for the next step? And it was really get out of debt, build a runway, network, buy some assets, and let's start a business. And that was the plan from day one. And I feel really good about the fact that I was able to stick to that plan.
Yeah, I love it. And it, again, what really resonates with me is you had a game plan off the field as well as on the field. And it reminded me of something that you posted a few months ago. I remember you were talking about like margin, like you need to create some margin in your life. And, I think your post was directly speaking to the financial piece, but if you think about it, margin really in any area of your life, whether it's in your health, right? Consistently, being active, whether it's, developing great relationships, whether it's finances, like creating that margin in your life really does allow you more margin for error so that it allows you to take the right opportunities as opposed to taking, like you said, the first thing that comes up.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the stress in our life comes from, right? It's
Mhm.
when your time is someone else owns your time and they lease it back to you. It's a stressful place to be in, right?
Mhm.
Especially if the person you're doing a deal with is somebody that doesn't have your best interest in mind, because
Yeah.
then there's no negotiating. And so we have to find positions of leverage, if you
Mhm.
will, right? Where you can do more with less, where you can get more done in less time so that you save more time, so that you can do more with less money, so that you can save more money, so that you can be in one place, maybe it's virtually, so that you can also be in another place physically with other people afterwards quicker, you know? So margin is everywhere, and it's depends on what you want to optimize for, right? I said at one point in time, I was optimizing for my goals so much that it could get you out of whack with other things. But now it's more like, let me optimize for lifestyle so that each day when I wake up, I don't have to hit the snooze button. I can just hop out of bed and I can feel excited about the challenges that are ahead of me. And I don't want to make it sound like everything is sweet, right? Like life gets hard, right? Life gets really hard at times.
Mhm.
But when you have a situation that you feel you have control
Mhm.
over a certain amount of what you're able to do and what you're able to say you don't want to do,
Mhm.
when you have an opportunity to be creative, because that is, to be creative is to be human, right? We all think of funny jokes, we all connect dots that other people might not see, we all pick outfits, we all like music or movies. There's different forms of expression of creativity. Some people get to do that in their career. So if you have some autonomy, you have some control, you have some room for creativity, and you can actually live off of what you're doing, I feel like that's a great situation to be in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like as you're sharing there, it just reminds me of like that's the true essence of what freedom is, right? Like freedom is having the ability to choose how you spend your time, your energy, right? Your days, your money, so that you can just do more of what you love. As cliche as that is, like that's it's sort of like this idea of like lifestyle by design.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that means you're supposed to retire and just do nothing. But I
Yeah.
think it's more so like finding your vocation, right? And
Mhm.
I don't remember who said this, but I believe it deeply in my heart. You don't find your passion, you create it.
Mhm.
And so the more that you toil and struggle with something, and the more you dedicate time and effort and you spend energy towards something, and while you're spending that energy, you find an appreciation for the gain that you see
Mhm.
during that process. That's what passion is. Passion is falling in love with something that is hard to do.
Mhm.
Passion is falling in love with the process of improvement
Mhm.
without the promise of a future return or a success. That's why sports are so cool, is because you can show up to every single practice on time. You can stay late. You can catch extra balls. You can fill up the water. You can do the laundry. You could do all that stuff. You could watch all the film, and there's no guarantee that you're going to win, right? But
Mhm.
that's why people are so passionate about it, because despite the lack of a guarantee, they continue to show up because there's something that that sport unleashes from within them that nothing else can have that same effect. So yeah, for someone who can find a vocation, a job, an opportunity, a career to earn money in something where they're having fun, they're
Yeah.
creative,
Mhm.
and they have at least some control, I think that's a huge blessing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about, I'm very mindful of the word using vocation. I think you. I shared this with you once. I think on one of our conversations on social, I had a great coach that shared this with me. Like you work for satisfaction, you provide service to earn a living. And I remember that no one had ever shared that with me, but it made so much sense to me. And I find that whenever I am able to live that out and truly embody those words that of what that wisdom he was sharing with me, I find that life just feels different. Like how your perspective, your outlook on life just is completely different.
Yeah, well, I'll share my ultimate favorite quote with you. And this is how I think about doing small things and taking pride in doing small things. Well, there's two quotes. One, I say it all the time because Coach O from the Hamilton Tiger Cats always says this, and so I think about it all the time. He says, don't walk past mediocrity. Meaning, if you see something that you can make an impact on and it's right there in front of you, why would you wait for somebody else to change it when you can change it? Right? Don't walk past mediocrity. If there's something on the ground, pick it up, put it in the garbage. Right? Someone leaves the drawer open, close the drawer. You know, do the little things. But my ultimate favorite quote of all time is, even we who cut mere stones must envision cathedrals. Just meaning, like, you might think that you're doing something that doesn't matter. Like, you're just literally cutting stones, cut them at a right angle, make them into a rectangle, make them a square, pass them down the line. I'm cutting stones. But lo and behold, those stones stack together and they make something that is much bigger than any one individual unit, right? Like, those stones go together to make a cathedral in the example. And I think about those buildings that are, like, you know, in movies and stuff, where you go to any of these historic cities. There was literally people who built them brick by brick. And you might think to yourself, me not being an engineer, you look at it and you're like, man, I can't believe that they made this like hundreds of years ago. This is humongous, beautiful building. The architecture is amazing. It's because there was no detail that was too small for them to sweat over. And so you don't have to overly analyze situations. That's not what the moral of that story is. The moral of the story is, when you find work that you love, it's not a grind for you to do the little things that separate good from great. Like, if I run a football camp, I'm going to make sure that all the cones in the drill are the same color. Why? Because I love when it looks like that. Not because I'm afraid or any of those other things. It's just because I love putting together an event that people come to and they think, man, this is the coolest thing that I've ever done. But you're only able to elevate to that level when you sweat the small details and you think about the things that other people would walk past.
I love that analogy. And it's interesting, like, as I think back on, some of the conversations we've had, that speaks volumes about who you are. So I'm curious, you create this margin in your life, right? Once you chose to take this new adventure, post, professional, being a professional athlete. I'm curious, what inspired you to move into this role, into the role you are in now with the Ticats, as the director of community partnerships?
Yeah, so my role, what I do right now, is I work with our organization and other organizations that might be nonprofits, they might be student-related organizations and school boards, or they might be amateur sports. And so we have a soccer club and we have a football team. So I get to work with all different kinds of athletes, all different kinds of students, all different kinds of nonprofits. And like I told you before, in those 5 pillars that I wanted to develop in my personal life before I graduated from that one phase of my life, playing professional sports, to the next phase of my life, one of those pillars was to create a business. And that business was based around an expertise that I had developed. So I think we spoke about this recently. I always feel like you need to get the highest return on the thing you've invested the most in. So I invested 22 years into playing football, learning the game, developing my skills, honing my craft. That's physical, that's mental, that's being a coach, the teacher, orchestrator of events, all those kinds of things. And so the first time I was able to cash out on that experience was as a professional. The second time I was able to monetize that experience was building the business of teaching other athletes how to develop their body, their academic skills, their professional skills, and all those kinds of things. And then I think this is the third go around for me, leveraging that same experience, or the combination of those experiences, because what I'm doing now is I'm putting on those same types of events. I'm the bridge between current athletes and the next generation of athletes. I'm the bridge between people who are running events and they're trying to drum up some attention, but we have a whole army of ambassadors who's ready to really just represent brands in the community that they love and that they're a part of, right? So it's a great marriage of my past experience,
Mhm.
whether that was playing, being the athlete who's going out and signing the autograph, or the person who was running the camp, or the kid who went to the camp. I'm very familiar with what it feels like to be on all sides of that equation. So that's why this role right here, it just made so much sense when the opportunity came. I had to throw my hat in the ring, and it's been great ever since.
Mhm. And it's interesting, like as you share some of those experiences, and I've been blessed to be able to watch you, at some of our Football Ontario events. We've been able to kind of collaborate on some things. It's really cool because I think one of the things, not being formally business trained, I always love this idea of like, how do you build a business? And I remember hearing this advice by so many people, like you're best positioned to help and serve the person you once were. And I think
Mm.
everything you highlighted right there just talked about that, right? Is you are taking all of your lived experience that has helped you become the strong and powerful being you are today, and now you're just blessing people with even greater experiences on their journey.
Yeah, because you don't have to, first of all, you're telling your truth. The easiest thing in the world to do is to tell your truth,
Yeah.
right? And then on top of that, a lot of people, and this is where I struggle sometimes when I go outside of football, pro sports, finance, even though I do have proficiency in other realms, I start to question myself with the imposter syndrome of, am I the one that's qualified to deliver this message? But the thing I got to remind myself is you don't have to be Tony Robbins to be on a stage. You just have to be a few steps ahead of the person who is reaching out to you for advice, so
Mhm.
that you can bring them along to the place where you've had success, and
Mhm.
then you continue learning together. Because ultimately, you're not claiming to be I'm not claiming to be the world's smartest football coach. I'm not claiming to be the greatest executive in all of sports. I can aspire to be those things, but you just have to be able to be a couple steps ahead of the person who's asking you for help,
Mhm.
and that's it. Tell your truth and bring them along with you as you continue to grow.
Mm. And it's interesting how it's so simple, right? Like this idea, like you said, like you just have to be able to tell your truth. And why it resonates with me is when I left teaching in 2019, I felt I needed to remove myself from the world of sports and football. Like I just felt like I had sort of, I don't know, just something intuitively said to me, you got to leave it. And I actually left for 2.5 years and just fully immersed myself in the entrepreneurial world. And it was interesting how it was actually a conversation early on in when I was starting to podcast where my wife looked at me after and she said, "Can I tell you something?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Have you noticed you're different when you just the energy you have once you're done talking with high quality athletes and coaches?" And again, my wife has this beautiful way of like challenging me in a loving way, and I realized you're right. And it was interesting from that moment where I started to realize, okay, it's time to come back in this world. It's time to take some of that lived experience I've had away from sport and bring it back into sports, into football. That I feel like this is what has led me to where I am today, is because again, I'm just taking some of these lessons, you know, sharing the nuggets of wisdom that I've had and helping and serving people along their journey and allowing them to take from it whatever they need to hear.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of coaching is you do a lot of it for yourself, right? In some way. Obviously, we love to see other people do well, and that's part of what excites us
Mhm.
as coaches, is the seeing that light bulb go off in someone else's head and being able to pass that torch. But there's a level of fulfillment that comes from, just being in your element and putting to it's like a puzzle. You're connecting pieces, you're strategizing on how's the best way for me to distill down this concept that took me so long to grasp, so that it's easier for someone else to grasp it. And those are the challenges that we as coaches, um, in general, we as people who solve problems, we love to tussle with, because at the end of the day, it's the greatest form of genius is simplicity.
Yeah, I love that. Again, so good, and it just reminded me of some of the conversation we had at the women's football conference, like just these conversations, these organic conversations where we started talking big picture stuff and how I don't know, it just
Mhm.
inspires you to think about creating new things and helping and serving people in a greater way. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious again, it's been really great to see how your roles are evolving. I, but I'm curious, like, has there been an experience that really is at top of mind for you where you go, oh, like this is fun. Like this really is where I belong. Like this is truly allowing me to like fully live a rich and fulfilling life. I'm curious, what has there been experience since being in this role?
I mean, there's just so many opportunities all the time to do things that are impactful.
Mm.
And you could see the change happening in people's lives, whether it's somebody who wasn't really feeling too hot about themselves and now they've got that little bit of confidence, or a kid who's seriously thinking about maybe taking it to the next level and starting to get serious about the way they prepare and the way they approach school, or you raise a ton of money to go towards a great cause, or you pack food with a bunch of folks who rally around a community and you're able to give lunches to 1,000 students across the city. Like the the spectrum is so broad of the things that we do. But I think the most fun that I've had, aside from being on the other side of the lines and watching some of my good friends make amazing plays, I had a ton of fun in the summer last year. We got to bring the junior Argos and the junior Ticats to Tim Hortons Field, and at halftime they played an overtime style shootout. And I got to be at the center of the ring like Michael Buffer and just announce the whole thing in front of 24,000 people. And that was a cool moment under the night lights. It's just all of those kids, that's got to be the biggest crowd that they've ever played in front of. And for some of them, a lot of them, it will be the biggest crowd they ever play in front of. And that moment was huge for them. And it was amazing to be a part of it.
Mm. That's, just as you described that, like just being able to provide that opportunity for those young people, like being able to play in front of 24,000 people. And like just imagine like what some of those young people, like what hope that you inspired someone with that day. Like who knows where that could lead? Like you literally inspired someone to change the trajectory of their family tree. Like how
Who
cool is
knows?
that?
Who knows? And here's the thing too. And just knowing that, like, I'm just one of hundreds of people that go into making these kinds of things happen, right? Like, it's a privilege to be on the ship because there's only 9 teams in the CFL,
Mhm.
right? And then there's one NBA team, there's 6 NHL teams. There's not a lot of opportunities to do this stuff.
Mhm.
So, with the nine home games, you can have a very long career and not have a lot of those types of opportunities, right? I was a big analytical, thoughtful guy. So I would break these things down and really think about that moment is more rare than it even sounds like, because there's not a lot of teams, there's not a lot of night games in the summer, there's not a lot of times when these two rivals are going to meet, right? So sometimes you really do have to just be grateful that you can be it's a blessing to be a blessing, right?
Mhm. It's interesting as you share that because the more like you describe kind of your experience, with Thai cats, it makes me reflect on some of the experiences I've had to just be there and just experience it from different, as a fan watching a game or just being able to support some of our uh, leaders and, with the women in football conference. And it's just, there really is a different vibe in Hamilton. Like it just really gives this sense of family. So I'm curious, is that something that in your experience has always been a part, or is that something that's really important to the team and the organization?
Absolutely. 100%, no question. If you look at where we're situated right now, I'm on the suite level of Tim Hortons Field. I'm looking out the window across the field past the East Grandstand and I see rows of residential houses. These are the houses that people lived in when the steel factories just through my other view down there were what was fueling the Canadian economy. Like the railroads that run all through this country, that steel is made in Hamilton, you know? So this is a part of the backbone of a lot of what we live in today, was developed here, and it was these folks here. And it's not that these people from that great economic boom of the country became super wealthy. Like these are hard hat lunch pail people who've their gym teacher, their father, their grandfather, their whatever mail person who was coming delivering the mail carrier, somebody worked at the stadium as well. Somebody played for the team as well. Somebody rented out their lawn for $10 for parking for games. Somebody was the person selling programs in the stadium, right? Everybody has a tie to this. So 155 years old, this franchise that I'm a part of is really woven into the culture of this community. And so when people come out and, you know, they put together enough money to bring a family of 4 or family of 5 to a game, it means something. They're trying to, like I was talking about the video games at the beginning, bring it full circle. It's like, that's their chance to do something that's an escape from punching that clock. And so the guys know that. And that's why you see the effort that they give, because it's showtime. When the lights come on, they want to see somebody put on that black and gold and do Hamilton proud. So it's well understood, and it's part of why this organization typically does really well in the community, get a lot of support. But then on the field, that energy is felt. Like these fans will let you know every time it's third down, every time it's late in the game, they're right there screaming, passionate, because it's more than just a game. It's them versus everybody else, you know, and not in like a anybody else's worst kind of way, but in a way like, let's all come together and like, let's go to Tim Hortons Field and we got something positive we can cheer about.
You just brought me back to, again, you blessed me to be able to bring my son to a playoff game a couple of years ago, and he still speaks of the experience. I think we had the opportunity to experience a true Hamilton tailgate, walking in for a playoff game and on a cold, snowy day.
What was that atmosphere like?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've sat beside Hamilton fans, you know, at other CFL and other CFL stadiums, and their energy and enthusiasm is the exact same. It doesn't matter if you're in Hamilton or you're anywhere else. And I love that. Like, that's just like, that's passion.
Yeah. And you can't fake that. You can't fake that. Doesn't wash off in the shower, man.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, brother. You know, I'm curious, like, as you move forward, right? You know, as things continue to grow and as your role continues to grow and evolve, I'm curious, what's next? Like, what is something that's on your heart that you would like to see happen?
Man, I have so many targets, goals, things I want to accomplish in life. Really, I'm focusing on becoming somebody who can serve more. You know, I want to be able to scale up my experience. And by scale my experience, what I mean is I love to work with people one-on-one, and I will always do that. But I think there's a lot of unique intersections that my experience has had. Like, I played football in Canada and the US. I've played professional sports. I've been able to get a career in the business side of professional sports. I've done public speaking. I've done traditional things, like I've worked in sales. I've been an entrepreneur. I've done a lot of different things. And I think I have the language to communicate to a group of people who are often overlooked. And so I want to be able to scale my ability to communicate to more folks, and build my platform to be able to speak to more of them, not for a profit, just for the sake of the fact that, like, it would be a shame if I took it to the grave with me. You know, there's people who got to hear that kind of stuff, because maybe somebody else is telling them the exact same thing in a different language and they're not fully understanding it. But I might have the right combination of words to get that light bulb to go off. So I think that's one of my passions. And I think that starts at home with, trying to not oppress and be too stingy and try to be overbearing, but trying to be the best role model that I can be for my kids and my family, right? Try to be more supportive, more patient, more understanding, more courageous to do things that I haven't done before, and just, be somebody that people can count on. And then if I do that, man, life goals, those are easy.
Mm.
Like I tell my wife this, and like, not to sound arrogant, I feel like it's important to be 100% real. Like, I set out a humongous lofty goal as a young child and achieved it. And so after you do that, it's very hard to find something else that's going to push you in the same way. So you have to find a way to transition from the external motivation of reaching certain goals to the internal intrinsic motivation of self-improvement, because self-improvement is forever. Whereas if I was driven by making $1 million, then what happens when I hit 1 million? Am I just gonna, then is my life over? Well, I have to look inside, and I think that's what I'm focused on right now.
Mm. It's interesting you share that, and again, I love, like you talked about, like this mission to just help and serve more people. And what it really reminded me is this quote from Goethe, and it talked about this idea, and I'll paraphrase it, that in order to do more, you must first be more. And it sounds like that's what's getting your focus right now, is finding opportunities to be more. And it sounds like, you have that awareness and that understanding that when you focus on being more, that's where you can bless the world with more. And again, the opportunities just flow.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty bucket, but I'm not even concerned with my bucket being empty. I need it to be as big as possible, because I got a lot of people I'm trying to impact.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, brother. I know that this conversation inspired someone, and you've definitely piqued the interest of our football Ontario family as well. What's the best way people could connect with you if they're looking to?
Well, I'm active on the internet, but I say a good place to connect with me is you can find me on LinkedIn. I tend to post some more structured thoughts there about the things that I'm working on. But I'm also, if you're into sports, I'm like a humongous Toronto Raptors fan. Um, and I'm into finance. So if those are the quips and the quick wit and the cheeky stuff you're looking for, you can find me on Twitter. But for the buttoned up, the ideas and all of those other things, you can find me on LinkedIn and anywhere else where they've got people on the internet. I'm usually there too.
Absolutely. So, and I'll be happy to share all of your handles and all of the places people can find you in the description, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or the podcast. And folks, I will say, as someone who's been following and connecting with Courtney, he will definitely offer some food for thought, and it will prompt you and provoke you to stop and think. Which again, that's kind of the first step in any level of greatness. I just want to take a moment to thank you, Courtney. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for the great man you are, the great husband, the great dad, teacher, coach, mentor, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are. The one thing I've really come to appreciate you in our conversations, whether they're online or whether it's, in person, whether it's, virtually, is just I love how you approach the game of life. You're very thoughtful, you're very intentional, you're very open to learning, growing, and evolving, and it inspires me. Whenever I'm around you, whenever I connect with you, it always inspires me to just, am I doing the best I can? Could I tweak this a little bit? So just want to thank you for being a shining light in my life.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your consistency too, man. Every day that I get a chance to talk to you, it's always, it's positivity, it's uplifting, it's It's not even glass half full. It's just fill that thing up, man. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. I received that. So folks, Courtney dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom. But as I like to remind you every time in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates great results. So I encourage you to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations is, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share this conversation with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, or someone you feel that just needs to hear a positive, inspiring, empowering message. The more people we have listening, understanding, applying these simple principles to their life, the more beautiful this world will be. As always, I love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I'll chat with you next time in the huddle.